Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video. I hope you're all well. I want to begin by wishing Chag Maruchim to Linda Banning on the passing of her mother. I also want to wish Refuah Shalema to Neil Bretsky, who's sadly going through a difficult time in America. Shirley's son, wish the whole family Refuah Shalema. And on a happier note, wish Mazel Tov to Harvey and Anita Goldstein, who had a grandson, and to the Bakerman and Hudley families who will be celebrating a bar mitzvah in London. This week, we're going to have the rare and unique privilege of reading from three separate Sefer Torahs, because firstly we have the Tazria, which is Tazria, and then we have the fact that it is Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month of Nisan, and thirdly it is Parashas HaChodesh, which is the fourth of the special readings we have for this time of year, where Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses in Egypt, when they were getting ready to leave, he gave the people the first mitzvah, the first commandment they got as a nation, which was to sanctify the new month. In earlier times, they would sanctify the month when they saw the new moon, and witnesses would come to the Beth Din, tell them we've seen the moon, and they would check them out, make sure telling the truth, and then they would spread the word that it is Rosh Chodesh. Since the 4th century, so already now for about 1500 years, we've had what's called a fixed calendar, which means that we know when Rosh Chodesh is going to be. If we come back to the Sedra for a moment, one of the main story, the main subject, is the concept of tzoras, which was a spiritual affliction. It looked like a patch on the skin, or could be on clothing, on a house, perhaps similar to leprosy, like white patches on the skin. But the rabbis tell us this didn't come, it was in those times, we don't have it anymore, but those times it came as a spiritual, a supernatural illness, where God was sending you a message that you have to consider your behavior. It was for telling lies, for evil slander, what we call lashon hara, misusing the privilege of speech, and that was the punishment. And when one had it, one had to go to the kohen, one had to go to the priest, and he would be the expert. He was like a spiritual type of doctor. He would assess it and decide whether the person was impure or not, and if they were considered tamei, ritually impure, they'd have to leave the camp and have what today we know in COVID as isolation, but not physical isolation, because this wasn't a contagious disease in a physical sense, but it was a spiritual isolation. Time out, time to think about his behavior. The person makes sure they are able to live in society correctly. It's interesting to note that Rabbi Saul Salanta explains, he says that last week's Sedra, the dominant feature of the second half of last week's Sedra was the laws of kosher animals, how we know animals are kosher, chewing the cud, split hooves, and with fish, fins and scales, and which type of birds, generally only peaceful birds, that not birds of prey, etc., the ones we have a tradition for. He says, that's about what goes into your mouth. He said, now we have to realize it's not just about what goes in our mouth, because the rabbis tell us what goes into us has an effect on us. And that's why we have this idea of timtum halev. If somebody eats non-kosher food on a spiritual level, it has a negative effect. He says, that's all very good to worry about what goes into your mouth. He says, now we have to start realizing it's also important to consider what comes out of our mouth. Is the way we speak to people refined? Is it correct? Do we use speech to make people feel good, to enhance our relationships with each other, or is it about negative, backstabbing? Is it all destructive? Speech is a very, very powerful tool. It has the power to build. Everyone remembers a compliment they've received, and it also has the power to destroy. People can always remember insults and being humiliated far more than they can probably remember being hit. Of course, that was very prominent in the media this week. The story of the actor Will Smith hitting the comedian. He didn't like what he said. But we see there again the power of speech. It really can anger people, really make people upset, really insult people, and we have to take extra care to make sure that what we say is always done with the best intentions and in the best way, so we don't, God forbid, come to the sins of Lashon Hara, of evil speech. Wishing you all a wonderful Shabbos and a good Chodesh.